Hello and welcome to this Prospect webcast. I'm Jay Elwes, Associate Editor of Prospect, in conversation today with Gary McKeating. He's Head of Community and Development at Sellafield Ltd, and that's the company that manages the largest, most complex nuclear site in the UK, based in West Cumbria, in the northwest of England. The company is responsible for the cleanup of the site, and it's a huge project that will take decades. But while this work progresses, the question is, how does a company that is the dominant employer in an area support the future economic and social well-being of that area? The people at Sellafield have been looking closely at this question, and they've come up with some very interesting answers, which will be of great significance for people in West Cumbria, but also perhaps for people in Britain more widely. So, Gary McKeating, hello, thanks for joining us today.
Welcome.
You've got a number of initiatives that at Sellafield that you're working on, various funds and so forth to help support and develop the local economy. Tell us a bit about what you've got going on.
Okay, so as part of the Energy Act in 2004, we have a responsibility through the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, which are our owners, to look at how our decommissioning and mission change will affect local communities. So a lot of people don't realise that it's actually by statute that we have this responsibility. But what we've been doing is social impact over many, many years. But what we've just done is we've refreshed our social impact strategy and work as social impact multiplied. So the 6 programme. And what that means is that the work that we do, we want to make sure that we have the biggest effect that we can. So that involves aligning ourselves with the supply chain, with our local stakeholders, the local authorities, the Cumbria LEP, and any other economic actors in the county, so that any investment we make, we want to see leverage from other areas, so that, you know, if we put in £1, we want to see a couple of pounds from elsewhere. So over the last couple of weeks, we've relaunched our social impact strategy as 6, and that involves probably 3 pillars. One is education and skills, one is the community, and one is the supply chain work that we do as well. So
could you start, you mentioned the supply chain issue a few times. Could you explain the logic of that in some more detail?
The logic is really very simple, and that is within tenders we put in a social impact weighting, and the supply chain then look at what they can do to help us deliver our strategy. So it's very, very simple. The supply chain, if they align with us, we can do much more together than we can alone as Sellafield. And I suppose it's getting the private sector shoulder behind the initiatives that we're investing in. You know, we've got great ideas at Sellafield. I've got a team that are constantly working with our stakeholders to work on projects. But the supply chain, who are working all around the world, may have some good ideas as well, and we want to harness that, because I think if we can harness good ideas, if we can harness the ability of the supply chain to perhaps inwardly invest in West Cumbria, look at other sectors within their business, we can really do some step change social impact here in West Cumbria.
And what are some of the initiatives? What's some of the detail of those initiatives that you're?
Okay, I'll take a few examples that are fresh from this week. We would have announced over the last few months, but with the COVID-19, it obviously was a bit of a bump in the road there. So some of the initiatives, one is Transforming West Cumbria, and that is working with our local community foundation, and that is a series of about 6 projects that work with anchor organisations in West Cumbria. So it might be the Citizens Advice Bureaus, it might be third sector and charities that are actually underpinning the fabric of our community. It's a £2.2 million programme over 3 years, and that will distribute grants and work with those anchor organisations, because what we found during the last 4 months was a lot of the third sector and charities really stepped up to the mark during the pandemic and really galvanised and organised action in their own communities. Another one would be, for example, the Well project, which is a educational project, £1.7 million, and that is targeting those most disadvantaged pupils to try and bring together that attainment gap that we sometimes find in disadvantaged pupils. This week we've announced The Edge, which is a coastal activities centre on the harbour side in Whitehaven, and that was in conjunction with funding from the Coastal Communities Fund. So I mentioned earlier around that leverage. It's important for us that we can bring in other funding as well, and often when we're working on projects, if the applicant can say, we have £1 million from Sellafield agreed in principle, they might bring in another £2-3 million. Over the recent years, £30 million invested in a campus at Whitehaven, which was a new build school for 2 schools locally. We put in 10 million, leveraged another 20 million for that. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking to do. Diversification here in the economy. We recognise that there is almost an undue influence of the nuclear industry because of its size. So in working with our local authority partners, Copeland Borough Council here in West Cumbria in particular, over a couple of those programmes, we're working on what their vision is for the area, because we want to co-create with the community. We don't want to say this is our idea as Sellafield and that's all we're going to do. What we actually do is co-create and build the project from the bottom up on the ground, evidenced by need.
Mm-hmm. And these are substantial sums of money. Do you have a sense of how much Sellafield will be investing in the local community in total?
Well, I mean, my budget per year is between 10 and 11 million pounds. So that's given to us by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority to distribute on these projects. But importantly for me, it's not so much around that budget, which is a social impact budget, particularly for West Cumbria. £2.1 billion of taxpayers' money is spent through Sellafield every year, and I think it's beholden on us to make sure that we give value for the taxpayer, not only in terms of the projects that we deliver on site and the way that we operate, but also in terms of social impact. I think social value is increasingly important. I think post-pandemic, I say post, we're in the middle of it still, so I think it's going to be a very difficult few years to come. So I think the taxpayer is now looking to big businesses to say, how are you going to help through the recovery process? And I think that is the important part, the £2.1 billion. If we can get social impact embedded into the things that we do, and we're making good progress. We have social impact in waiting in tenders. Our chief executive, or the last chief executive and this one, Martin Chown, is very, very wedded to the idea of social impact, and it is a real push constantly from Martin as well. So it's from the top, right from the very top of the organisation. We're looking to deliver good in the community because it's good business for us.
Mm. And also part of this is to encourage is to try and stimulate economic activity in the local economy, because as you've, I think, mentioned, there are parts of West Cumbria that are economically perhaps not where you'd want them to be, and that chimes with the government's recent ideas about what it calls levelling up, about trying to improve economic conditions in parts of the country where perhaps there's not been enough attention so far. So it seems that your actions, your activities have kind of preempted that in some way.
I think we work very closely with the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. I think in terms of our approach, it's disadvantage, and we do have some areas of disadvantage in West Cumbria next to some very affluent areas as well. So there's a juxtaposition there in the local economy. So I think it's beholden upon us to make sure that because of disadvantage or background or geography, you're not precluded from joining the nuclear industry or any other sector in West Cumbria. So a lot of the education work we do is around, and it's not just altruistic, because with a 100-year plus programme of work, what we want as a business is, the best educated individuals in our locality, and also bring in, the best individuals from outside as well. So I think the education work is very important. And you're right, we're apolitical in terms of levelling up. We're doing that on a very local basis anyways. It's a cliche, but a rising tide lifts all boats. And what we want to see is making sure that our work is for all of the people in our community.
Sure. You've mentioned education several times. Are there particular elements of education that you would like to see, on which you would like to see more focus, that you think are of special interest to Sellafield?
Yeah, I mean, the work that we do actually starts preschool. Some of the social impact projects we fund are actually preschool, but then we've got a Cumbria, a primary business partnership. We've got a secondary business partnership where we're trying to join up private sector with education. So, whether that's around aspiration, whether it's around choice for future employment. So I think there are some great schools here in West Cumbria, and there are some that need a little bit of assistance because they're in more challenging areas often. And I think the work that we do through the WELL project, which is that £1.7 million project I mentioned earlier, on narrowing the attainment gap, that's important. When we employ people locally, and not just in the nuclear industry, if there's extra assistance needed there as well. So it's not just about at school, it's around upskilling people as well. So we look for projects around upskilling. Because not only is it for us as an industry, it's for the wider sector and economy in West Cumbria and beyond. So it's very interesting work, and it's long term, and it's got to be measurable. One of the big things for the 6 program is it's based on, at the beginning, it's root cause, so addressing what the issues are, but also right through the process, measuring things, because we want to measure, and that's to optimize, because it isn't just a case of ticking boxes and getting outputs. It's about where a program works well, how can we actually make it motor even more? So we measure to optimize.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what you're doing is incredibly impressive in terms of its scale and in terms of its ambition. Do you get the sense that there are other people around the country and regions, perhaps like your own, who are paying attention to what is going on in West Cumbria, and who might indeed start to do likewise?
I think that there are organisations right across the public and private sector that are doing some great things. I think our social impact strategy 6 is built upon UN sustainability goals. We've had the strategy for around 3 years now, agreed by the Sellafield board. And one of the things that the Sellafield board liked was that it was built around UN sustainability goals. So it just wasn't about a very particular, West Cumbrian focus. It was actually around, gender equality, no poverty, access to good work. So I think those aims from the UN apply, to West Cumbria as well. And I think we're hopefully doing a good job. We can always do better. I think I'm very proud of the work that we do at Sellafield. I think it is class leading in many respects. However, what I would say is we always want to do better, and we're open to advice, opinion, support. So, I would say anyone in the UK that is doing this kind of work, and our own as a nuclear decommissioning authority have 17 sites across the UK. So we now have a UK-wide approach to this as well. And they inform us and we inform them as Sellafield, whether it's Dounreay up in Scotland or Wilver in North Wales. So in areas around nuclear sites that have particular issues, I think it's important that we share learning and we take learning from each other. And that's what we've been doing and will continue to do with the 6 programme.
So the decommissioning program is going to take, as you said, up to maybe 100 years. And so sadly, that means that neither you nor I will be around to see the final chapter.
I'm very dogged, so I might be. I'll try my very best.
But I mean, if we cast our minds forward 100 years' time, what do you think success will ultimately look like for Sellafield?
I think for me, it's a vibrant, thriving community that's based on beyond nuclear. So that's everything from tourism to, the digital sector, the kinds of approaches that we're looking now to. In the nuclear sector, a lot of our supply chain companies do other things around the world and do it fantastically well. I would love to see some of that coming to West Cumbria. I'd love to see a really vibrant, wide-ranging economy built upon a fantastic education system and a really strong community feel where the fabric of the community is as strong as it can be. I think we're on that journey now. It's going to be very, very challenging. Always has been, always will be. With COVID-19, it's thrown a real spanner in the works because as we, the next couple of years, I think will be extremely difficult for all of us in society. So I think the work that we do on social impact is now as important as ever, and probably more so. So the work that we're doing is really exciting and challenging. But we've got a great team of people at Sellafield, and we work with great people out in the community to try and address these issues.
Yeah, COVID is it's already having some quite interesting impacts on the way people work, on people's working lives. And I know a lot of people who now work remotely or have who could live a radically different life. Do you think that it poses an opportunity for Sellafield to draw in people to the region from some of the cities and surrounding areas who would be able to live and work there, who have not had that opportunity because they've been desk bound elsewhere before? Do you see that as something that you could pursue?
I think all businesses will be pursuing that because I think, I've worked from home for 4 months now. I was office based in the centre of Whitehaven. And when, lockdown started, I came to my house. Probably about, I would say, 3,000 or 4,000 people now from Sellafield are working from home. I think we'll end up with a hybrid. It's not for everyone, and from a personal point of view, I would rather have a mixed, a week at home and in the office, because the work I do, a lot of it is face to face. It's just different face to face now. It's like this, it's Zoom and Teams and so on. So I think a lot of I've got my team now looking at almost sanity checking the projects that we were looking at pre-COVID to make sure that they're still fit for purpose, in a different way of working. So I think the digital program, the digital sector activities that we're looking at will accelerate now. And I think, it is a bit unknown, but I think the one thing we do know, it will certainly be different. And as we get to that hybrid way of working, I think that will bring opportunities as well, because whether it's opportunities from people who now order online, which will have challenges as well. But I think what I've seen over the last few months with friends and family and colleagues is those with businesses are having to adapt very quickly. And one thing I would say for Sellafield was, if you told me 5 months ago that we'd be working from home on, with very little issues from an IT point of view, I would have said, in a big place like Sellafield with 11,000 people, that's going to take years. But no, our IT guys, because they had to, worked very quickly, and within weeks we were up and running and with very little impact. So I think for the economy, that will be embraced. I think people having to work differently and far more quickly and adapt more quickly than obviously they would have needed to without the pandemic.
That shows the power of quick thinking and innovative new ideas, doesn't it, I guess, which is pretty much exactly what we've been talking about today. So Gary, thanks very much indeed. Thanks to all at Sellafield, and thank you everybody to tuning in to listen to this Prospect webcast today. Thank you.
You're welcome.